Now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to tonight's author, Christine Walker, as she discusses her new book, Tap Dancing at the Bluebird, an uplifting novel of love, family, and friendship that pairs a coming-of-age adventure with a later-life tale celebrating dance and second chances across a century in America. Christine has an MFA in Writing and Literature in Fiction from the Bennington Writing Seminars and an MA in Creative Arts Interdisciplinary from San Francisco State University. A visual artist, she is also the author of A Painter's Garden, Cultivating the Creative Life, which we also have available here for you today. Highly recommend you check it out. And she is also a consultant in design and strategic visual facilitation with corporations and nonprofits, and a writing teacher, which we need more of. Now please help me in welcoming Christine Walker.
Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. This is it's always a very emotional experience where I look out on all these faces and see people from just all my walks of life, and it just means a lot to me that some of you made a real special effort to get up here, especially Friday night on 101. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Barbara. Yeah. Barbara, a good reading and writing pal who read some drafts of this and helped me. So I did want to reiterate what she said about the local bookstores. This is a treasure to have in our community, and time goes fast. And I think, especially this day and age, it's really important that we support our authors, our freedom of speech, our freedom of expression, and all of those things. I wanted to point out that I have a couple of my Sybil sisters. They were published also by the same press, Samantha Rose and Pamela Reitman. They both have books out. And what we found is that, writing is really, the writer writes alone. You might spend years writing a book, but once the book comes out, you really need the team. And the team is your publisher, and your cover designer, and your bookstores, and your distributor, and your author friends, as well as all of you guys. Readers and friends and people who recommend it to their book clubs. This is a really important part of the journey of a book finding its way into the world. And I like to say my book is dancing out into the world on its own 2 feet. But so far I have to say that it still needs me a little bit, dancing with it. So the book has a long journey from its inception. I started this in 2004. And I was inspired by my grandmother's diaries, my paternal grandmother's diaries, that she kept during the Great Depression, and really through the 20s and 30s. And she kept the diaries to kind of create a record or document that her kids would enjoy reading at some point. And I had these that my aunt she had transcribed them, and I'll show it to you. This is the transcription version. And I'll read you some in a minute. But so I found it. I read it, and it was just great to kind of see how my father's family lived in the early 30s, especially. The Great Depression was coming on, and I was really struck by just the straightforwardness of it. How she would just talk about the family, the kids, what they're doing, a birthday party or whatever, and then some really big event would happen. But she would just talk about it, and she was very resilient. She didn't complain. So I was very intrigued by that, and I began with this story of a little girl. It was a little bit patterned after my aunt. My aunt had told me a story about when she was a little girl tap dancing down the road. And so I had a girl that was a tap dancer, and I had a restaurant that the family owned. And my grandfather was an architect, and they did own a restaurant, but not till much later, like 38. So, and then very soon after I started this book, I applied to the Bennington MFA program. And I went to Bennington College on a low residency. And there, I did take a first chapter there, but my professors wanted me to work on something that was contemporary, sort of from my own life experience. So I put this book aside. And I worked on another book. And at that point, this book that I started was the third novel that I had begun. It ended up being the fourth one finished and the first one published. Some years ago, when I wrote this book, Painter's Garden, I started writing stories. When I was finished, I turned that into my publisher, Warner Books. And I began writing stories, and one of my stories got longer and longer. And I thought, I'm writing a novel. So then I wrote 2 novels, and this started this third one, and then went to get my MFA. So I didn't really get back to writing this one until a few years after I graduated that program, and I worked on it. And the story takes place in 1932 and 1960 and 2016, when Hillary Clinton became our first woman president, and that's how I ended the novel. That was in October of 2016. Now, it was really important to my character, Mattie, who at that time was like 94 or something. It's really important to my character, Mattie, that there was this woman president. So then I had to set the book aside for a while. And then I picked it up again, and I was working on it. And I had this character, Joe Wood, who was a tap dancing character who comes to the family's restaurant. And then in January of 2020, we were visited by tragedy in our family, and our son died, our son Quinn. And then soon after that, COVID hit. And I just found I couldn't work on this book. I mean, I could barely do anything. But the problem with the novel was that Quinn had never lived in 1932, and I was so bereft of him in my life, in my house, in my home. And then I would try to write the novel, and I was bereft of it there, so it was just like nowhere, So I think it was about May, I realized that I could change the name of my character, Joe Wood. And I changed it to Kip Kelly, which is just much more peppy. And I gave this character what I call quintessence. So I gave him some of Quinn's empathy and his humor and his way of moving and some of his ways of speaking and a huge heart. And that enabled me to continue working on the book and really look forward to working on the book, because I could be in this world that he never lived in, but he is there. And it's not that important to me that other people say, well, what about that is him, but my sister did see him in it. And anyway, that's a little insight into the novel writing process and this particular character. And I think that a novel is a container. I look at it that way. And I had an editor one time tell me that a novel is always about characters, not ideas. I would like to edit that to say that I think a novel is about characters who have ideas, and characters who have opinions, and characters who have motivations. And so the ideas are threaded through. You don't want some polemic, but I really enjoy novels that have ideas. So, as much as I wanted to make a memorable story that you would enjoy as a reader, I also really had some specific things I wanted to do. I wanted to put into literature a really good family, a really good, kind-hearted family, like my father's family. I wanted to put into literature something about dance and my love for dance. I'm not a good dancer. I like to dance. I took tap when I was a little girl. I came to California, San Francisco in 1977. I took a lot of dance classes then, tap and choreography and contemporary. And again, I wasn't a good dancer, but I ended up working with choreographers for about 14 years, designing sets and costumes. And in doing that, I ended up watching a lot of rehearsals. So there's parts of the book, especially the 1960s section, where I relied on my understanding of modern and contemporary dance. For the tap dance sequence, I ended up watching a lot of YouTube. Trying not to break my leg in my writing studio, because I try to do these bell kicks and things. And my tap teacher, who's a good friend and choreographer, did read the manuscript, and she gave me only a few corrections, so I got most of it right, but I would not be able to tonight teach you how to tap. Although I think in September we're going to do an event at OCA where we will have a tap lesson. So I'll keep you posted about that. And one of the other things I really wanted to do with this, well, there are a lot of things, movement, memory, and music, but I really had a sense of writing something that kind of encapsulated America, like what it means to be an American. Now, keep in mind, I started writing this in 2004, and I finished it last summer. So the current situation that we have, was maybe looming, but I didn't think we'd ever see that happening, what's happening now. And I feel like it's funny because I'm not a political writer, but I feel like this book is more political now because it's really about things that I grew up with, which is like, be a good neighbor and be kind and work hard and be resilient and don't be overly greedy. So, and also the whole melting pot aspect of America. So I purposely put a variety of people in here. I mean, I'm a white girl from Kansas, but I mean, there's an African American, a man who is the gardener, and he superintendent of the building, and he had come from the South. His parents had been enslaved. There's a woman who had been, her parents had been in the Japanese internment camp. So I just tried to populate the novel, which is what we novelists do. We populate our novels, but to represent sort of this melting pot. And these are just kind of subtle things that I put in, and I just did it because that's the kind of novel I wanted to read and the kind of novel I wanted to write. And now, honestly, it feels a little radical. So I just wanted to mention that because it's just become more clear to me in the last few weeks, really, that the things that I took for granted growing up, the kind of opportunities that we have. When my grandmother and when my dad grew up, they didn't have so many opportunities, and he worked really hard in his life, and he went to war, and he did a lot of things to guarantee that I would have a lot better life. So anyway, I tried to just kind of create this book where it's bookended, but it's also timeless, because we can go back and read about this time, and we can remember as much as we can remember about our lives. But then, like my grandmother who wrote about these times, it's a trace of her moving forward. So this is something that maybe exists. It's always a lot of hubris to think that your book's going to be around in 50 years. But this, I'm going to read you a passage from the diary, and it was written in May 1932. So that's been 96 years. And that's how I brought my grandmother's life and her observations of her world forward. And in this passage, my dad, who has bought the Bob Ellis, he would be 13. This is May 25th, 1932. This is just, and she calls my grandfather Daddy because she's writing for the kids to read this later. The church had a junior monitor program, and all the children took part and did well. I heard compliments for all of them. Mary Lou gave The Rose Family by Robert Frost, and Morton and Bob Ellis gave a little skit on Prohibition, and Peggy gave a reading on the belief of the unemployed. This is quite a siege the world is going through. Men who have commanded wages as high as $400 a month are working as janitors or doing anything they can get to make a living. Some can't even get that much of a job. Daddy hasn't had any work to speak of for about 8 months, but with a few dollars coming in from Bob Ellis, working at the drugstore, little odd jobs Daddy has, we have managed to keep going. Peggy is terribly anxious to have the telephone connected again. We hope it won't be long. Peggy is my father's older sister, and I did take a few little anecdotes from the diary and put in, such as, the phone gets cut off, and my character's called Betty, and she's not happy about it. But it's not really all the characters aren't directly from here. As a matter of fact, the father character in this story, who's my grandfather, from the diary, is really, I put a lot of my father into that character, because my grandfather died when I was 2, so I didn't really know him. Anyway, so what I was trying to go for in writing the book was a little bit of that voice. So my book starts out in 2020, and my character Mattie is 99. She's been a dancer, she's been a neuroscientist, and she's telling her granddaughter Janae about her life. Janae's 25 and is really just curious as to how you all did it, because they're right at this time in 2020, they're right on the cusp of the pandemic. It hasn't really happened yet, but they know something's coming. And so I sort of took this, a little bit of a matter-of-fact kind of voice, just this is how things are. But then as Mattie is talking to Janae, then it becomes in first person, of course, because she's the narrator. So you have this sense of sort of going back in time from the 2020 back to the 1932, so from omniscient and back to the first person. And then the Mattie character, who's speaking now as a wise woman, but I try to retain something of that girlhood in her narration. I'll just read you this passage there. Kip Kelly, the tap dancing roving youth, and he's 15, and he's come to the restaurant. And this is about the 5th day there that he's been there, and he's been teaching her to tap, because he knows that she has some ambitions eventually to get beyond Kansas City and either be a pilot like Amelia or go on Broadway or be in the movies. So he says, you'll need an edge, and so he's been teaching her to tap. And this day, he's trying to teach her some counting, some 4-count measures. He said, you got it, Mattie, now you invent one. I knew my states and capitals, but I could only think of city names with 2 or 3 regular beats. Lincoln, Topeka. I wanted something special. The Missouri Pacific calendar on the wall displayed a painting of a mesa that resembled a layer cake of red and buff-colored stone, a hot, dusty place under a lonely turquoise sky with no cloud in sight. I put together a phrase with a hop, hop, and a leap. I landed on the right foot and fell back to the left. Kip tapped it back with a timing equal to mine. Got a name for it, he asked. Amarillo. They let the L's bounce and roll to the O. Aces, Mattie, you're a whiz. Let's trade 4s. I'll change up yours first. Kip did my move again, adding his own touch. He tapped even counts on the first 2 syllables and then leapt wide on the trill and dropped down for a percussive finish on his heel, soft on the toe. Now you riff on mine. Heads up, Leroy shouted. He's the cook. The sink had overflowed. Kip switched off the faucet and grabbed a mop before Aunt Irene could walk in and holler at us. Leroy was amused and thoughtful. Kip, you ought to get in on the Tickle Your Ribs talent show down at the Hayride Club barbecue on June 2nd. That's Thursday night next week. There's prize money. I can get you signed up. A pal of mine works in the kitchen. Do it, I clapped. You could win. Kip stared down as if asking permission of his feet. Could I? You're better than most. Isn't that right, Leroy? That's all I'm saying. It's worth a try. Now, how about you 2 get out of my way? Leroy grinned and swatted us with a towel. I'll finish the mopping. He turned up the radio to a woman singing All of Me. I liked the song. I couldn't make sense of the singer giving her body parts away. I was sure that when I grew up and fell in love with someone, we'd be as happy together as my parents were. In the hall, Kip and I tapped out my Amarillo. That's a duet, Kip said. Now make it more your own. Try shaking your ankle out like you're flicking drops of water, or like I'm stepping on hot stones. Well, that'll do, but be careful not to clutch or force it. Releasing the muscles in your foot and ankle gets you the cleanest sound. I lifted my heel and toe more quickly off the imaginary hot stones. I let my body go sultry from the heat. Snazzy. He smiled in approval and tapped out his like popcorn pinging in a pan. I soaked up Kip's praise as we did it again and again. Me, the butter in the kettle, him the popcorn. I flowed into the movement. It was alchemy. I had once read about it in the library and learned a new word, transmutation. The solids from my bones become hot liquid, then slowly poured into a mold and shaped into something shiny, new, and golden. Piece of cake, Mattie. Kip reached for my hand and held it lightly in his. We danced, switching hands, left to right, right to left. Me melting, him pinging, as if an electrical current ran between us. We switched and popped, melted and pinged. The sensations were different from anything I'd ever felt before. It was not only the alchemy that was moving in me, it was the magic of dancing with him as my partner. Outside in the world, mean people like Edward Steeken roamed dusty, lonely places like Amarillo. Here, inside the Bluebird, lights streamed through the front window, ceiling fans cooled the air, and Leroy sang in the kitchen. I was the luckiest girl who had ever lived. Now, as you all know, you can't just write a novel about everybody being happy. So I had to figure out what to do, and I had to get her on the train and follow Kip on the train, and they had to have things happen to them. And I had a writing pal who actually ended up being my publisher, Vicki DeArmond, who used to be the marketing director at Copperfield, which is how I met her when I approached Copperfield to teach writing classes. We became good friends. Anyway, for a bunch of years, Vicki and I were trading our manuscripts back and forth, and she used to just like email me, "Get Mattie on the train." Because I just wrote around it, I wrote all the Kansas City part where everything's great. I mean, there was a Great Depression and stuff, but still there's so much love, but then they lose their house, and so she decides to leave. And then I wrote the later sections, but I had a heck of a time having her leave home. It was very hard. But I won't tell you all the things that happened, but there's definitely, there's adventure, and there's tragedy, and there's love and forgiveness, and kind of all the good things you hope to happen in a novel. So questions? Answer all your questions. Steve?
Yeah, having just recently read the entire book, which I love, and I apologize it took this long to get to it. I'm a slow reader. It's basically, as you said, there's the 30s, the 60s, sort of most recent 2020. Can you explain a little more about how you wrote each section and how you decided to order and reorder? Because I know you fiddled a lot with the order, checkerboarding and stuff like that.
Maps, diagrams, boards. Yeah, it was a bit of a puzzle, and I've actually there are some people who have said to me, I really love the 1932 section, when I get to like the 2020 section, and I really just want to get back to the 1932 section. I'm going like, yes! Because honestly, that's kind of what I wanted to happen, and maybe that's a little too meta, but it's kind of how I look at it. It's like, we all have this past that, and maybe it wasn't perfect, but we get nostalgia about our past and that sort of thing. And sometimes, I love the thing about memory where you can just be sitting there, someone can say something, you can hear something, smell something, see something, and all of a sudden, it is like in a movie, like, you go back into the past, right? So I wanted to have that sensation in a novel, and really the only way to do it is to have the reader go back and forth. The character's going back and forth, the reader kind of has to go back and forth with it. So I don't know if that answered your question, Steve, but I did then have to kind of figure out, where to break the 1932 section, how to land in 2020. This is Mattie at 99 and her granddaughter, and Mattie's telling the granddaughter the story. And then Mattie starts to tell the granddaughter about the past again. And then when you're back in the past, Janae, the granddaughter's nowhere to be seen, right? Mattie's just telling it. And then you go back, and now you're back in the kitchen with Janae and Mattie. It's like, oh, okay. Then you kind of want to get back to the 1932 section. So, and then there's also the 1960s. So I just worked it out. I mean, I hope I did a good job. And I did use a lot of calendars, they're here, and if I stop it right here, is that going to be enough tension to then go spend a day in Kansas City in 2020 and you really want to get back to 1932, or will you just close the book and walk away? Yeah.
I was impressed how much you knew about the train system.
Yeah.
and it was, in 1932, the way you traveled. It was, everyone wasn't flying like they do now.
Right.
And I just enjoyed that part, and you had to have done a lot of research about that.
Yeah, well, one of the things I was intrigued by is that there were about like 250,000 young people. Not probably too many as young as Mattie, but certainly a lot. Kip's age, 15. And but there were young people and younger, and there were people traveling for fun, and there were people traveling because they got kicked out of their home or they lost their home, and there were people traveling to go work and send money back home. And so I knew that. I watched movies and looked at photos and saw the hobos on the top of the train or in the boxcars. And then I had to find the routes, and I had to find, like, well, where could they go? And so I had maps and, figured out where they could stop and how many hours they'd be on the train. And there's a lot of math involved. And also, it's interesting because I was keeping the calendars of the story. So you have, Friday night when they start, and then Saturday Kip comes to the restaurant, and then there's Sunday, and then there's Monday, and she learns this kind of tap step on Tuesday and this kind of tap step on Wednesday, and so it's just trying to keep track of all that as a novel accumulates over the pages, and you want the reader to have reason to believe, oh, that's going to happen next, so you have to make it happen. So those were all the days, but then once they got on the train, it didn't make any sense to keep, this is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It was like, no, it's Wichita, it's Amarillo, because could be night or morning. I mean, it's, so. Now it was, again, this is the only, the other novels I've written are not historical, so this was an experience that I would love to have again, actually. Looking at Pam here, because she just wrote a historical fiction about a painter in Nazi Germany called Charlotte Solomon Paints Her Life. And you probably know this, but you can get really down a rabbit hole with research, but it's fun and it's interesting. So there's an awfully lot of things that intrigue me that I just couldn't put in the book, because then it becomes like this historical, nonfiction. But I tried to find things that would be that would work with the novel's message. So I had themes about transportation and movement, and I had themes about music and communication. And so I tried to put those things through, figure out, if you don't have a cell phone, how do you call home? If they don't have a phone because they lost their house, how do you get in touch with them? Well, maybe a telegram to the church or something. And so then where do they go? And they go to the post office to send a telegram. I mean, these seem like simple things, like we should know these things, but we don't. We forget them over time. As a matter of fact, I was going to give you this statistic, which I just ran across. I thought it was kind of interesting. In 1933, people spent 23% of time with family, 34% of the time with friends, coworkers, and neighbors, and 36% of their time in schools, college, and church, and 0% of their time online. In 2024, people spent 5% of their time with family, 23% with friends, coworkers, and neighbors, 6% in schools, colleges, and church, and 60% of time online. Now that must be including like Netflix and stuff. Anyway, so like I started this book in living rooms and in the house. It's very domestic in that respect. The 1960 section that takes place in New York, it's out and about in the world, but just that idea of home and losing your home and what is home, and that's another theme that I tried to explore.
You should mention that when you say train, you're talking about jumping freights.
Yeah.
You're not buying a ticket.
Right, exactly.
It's a big part of it.
questions? Are we doing on
Well,
time? Yeah.
So, well, I had experience when I was writing historical fiction where in research, going down that rabbit hole of research, that occasionally I would end up finding a little jewel.
Yes.
And it was so exciting. Like, this is the thing that's going to really give this scene like some authenticity. Did you did you have any experiences like that? Can you tell us about one?
That's a good question. No, I know I had those kinds of experiences, and I had experiences where I thought I would make something and I couldn't. Like, for instance, because I tried to be true to facts and history without being burdened by it. But, like, for instance, I was describing the restaurant and the chrome stools in the restaurant. That sounded about right. And then I found out that chrome really didn't come into use until October of 1932, and this was in May of 1932, so I didn't use chrome stools. And then in 1960, I made sure that the Cadillacs in New York had chrome bumpers, because I just kind of wanted, I just thought, okay, now I know about chrome. And that's a very insignificant little part, but I know what you mean. And there were certain things that I found through research that then did sort of inform the story, how it evolved. Yeah. Yeah,
I was going to ask, I don't know from Kansas City, Missouri, I still not clear about the Kansas City, Kansas part and all that, but what was it like for you to kind of go home in your mind back to this place where you had grown up?
Yeah.
And did you go there and actually walk those streets and hang out in those old houses, or what? How did you go back there?
And I did some of that, actually. As a matter of fact, it was probably in the teens. Maybe 2016, maybe I was back for like a 50th high school reunion or something. And Dennis and I went to this neighborhood which is near downtown, sort of to the east of downtown where my father grew up and where the first part of the book is set. And I called my aunt, my father's younger sister. My father had passed away by then. And I called my aunt, who was in Hawaii, and Dennis and I walked that neighborhood for about an hour with her on the phone. And she said, well, we go here, that's where we used to live, and we go here. And here's Cliff Drive, and then you go to Cliff Drive, and down below are the trains. It's about a 10-story cliff. And stare at school, and I didn't use all of it, but I definitely had that sense of how long would it take them to, walk the neighborhood, and, just kind of a sense of the neighborhood and the houses and things. So the house I described that's in here is not exactly the house; it's a different style of architecture, but it's common there. But my mom died she died early in 2016. And I used to go back about 5 times a year when my parents were still alive in the retirement community they lived in. And I've only been back a couple times since. And I didn't grow up in that part of Kansas City.
Oh,
I grew up on the Kansas side,
oh yeah, okay.
Shawnee Mission, and I even lived on State Line Road for a while as an adult on the Kansas side. You could look across the street to Missouri. But I was born in Kansas City, Missouri. Yeah. As was my friend Cynthia here. I've known since I was 2. I have to point that out. Yeah, so, then, the sense of place was important to me. It was a great place to grow up, and there's a lot of wonderful things about it. And there's a river, and there's, years ago, a long time ago, that's about as far as you could go. You go to Kansas City, and then you get on the wagon train. So it's been that kind of hub, and it still was in the 30s. There's people coming on the trains and stopping there or going somewhere else. It's also, I worked some politics into the story because at that time in Kansas City, there was Tom Pendergast, who was a Democratic boss and real crooked. I mean, he would do things like, he was a cement contractor, and he'd make cement like, 10 feet deep or something in the viaducts, which you don't need to do. But he was very crooked. But then we also had FDR at the same time. So it was interesting because I was trying to juxtapose, like, okay, just because you're a Democrat, you're not necessarily always good. But kind of so there's a FDR's in the 32 section and Kennedy's in the 1960, and then sort of didn't even write any names in the 2020. Yeah, Kelly.
You decided to give Mattie a profession as a neuroscientist.
Scientist, yeah.
Yeah, so can you help us, like, that transition from passionate about dance, wanted to be an actress or famous in some way, and then how did she get there? Do we understand? I mean, I just accepted it, and I thought, oh, that's cool,
Yeah.
But what, can you talk about your thinking?
Yeah, my thinking was, first of all, I think it's fascinating that and more, there's more and more research about brain science and how good dancing is for the brain. So without putting a lot of that kind of research into it, I wanted to drop that idea in there. So in Mattie's case, she's a dancer and a dance teacher, and then is intrigued to participate in studies that someone is doing about health and longevity and brain science, and that's before neuroscience was even a thing. But she's participating in the studies. And then I researched and found out that, neuroscience became like a thing that you could talk about and label yourself a neuroscientist and go get a PhD in it in the 70s. So, and then she does that because she's, a fairly progressive woman. So, and she also is really good at math, which I put into the early section, so then she's got that scientific brain. But part of it is when you're developing a character, you want, again, the idea thing. It's like, you don't want her just talking about the ideas. You want her living them. Steve?
There you go. Do you want to talk a little about this? You and I have talked a lot about this, the process now of distributing the book and promoting it and what you're doing, because I think it's fascinating because you have a strategy background,
Mm-hmm.
and you've published a book previously. So do you mind, maybe there's ways in which some of us here can help you?
It's my street team, eh? Very clever of you. I did not plant that question. Yeah, I mean, there's bookstores, and there's online, and there's fairs, and there's a lot of ways that people can find out about books. And there's a lot of books being published. There's a lot of books being published by the Big Five and by small presses and independents publishing their own books. So it's a little bit difficult to, raise your profile. It's difficult to get noticed. I can't promise you that every single person in this room will love this book. Some of you may love it. Some of you do love it. I know that. But some of you may go, oh, that's fine, but I'm not interested. I mean, hopefully you'll recommend it to your friends or book clubs. And I'm actually doing some book clubs on Zoom, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody about that, or in person here since we're local, but I'm doing some people in the Midwest. So you're just kind of always looking at opportunities to reach the readers, and I have a real issue with self-promotion. I mean, I'm just exhausted by it, honestly. It's just like me all the time. Oh, here's my picture, and here's my book. Don't you want to see another picture of me with my book? But, the other side of that is that from that has come Sally Ackerley, I haven't seen for decades, probably. We worked together in Kansas City, but she saw my Instagram, Facebook, I don't know.
Facebook, it
You
must
came up from Mill Valley, and we've been a bit in touch, but I haven't hung out at all. And so I've had a lot of those kinds of experiences with people, because I've been putting stuff on Facebook and Instagram and people connecting, and that's very rewarding. It's very, very rewarding. There's other aspects that are, you just have to do a lot. And when Warner published my book, they were one of the biggest publishers at the time. And they do, big publishers do a lot. I mean, they help get the books in the displays and the bookstores and things. But even with that, you just, you need your friends and your family and people to like you and talk about your book. And then hopefully they like the book and are serious, and then it starts to go out to people that people that you don't even know will buy your book. And I'm here to say and I saw that in action last Sunday because I flew down to the LA Festival of the Books. And I flew down wee hours of Sunday morning, and I flew back Sunday night, and as a matter of fact, Samantha was there with me too. And I watched several people pick up my book and ask me about it and buy it. And a couple of them were dancers, and one was a neuroscience student. Some just like, historical fiction. So I know that, I'm hoping that's happening just all over the world, but
Good.
I mean, it came out as an ebook initially first in early January, and then shortly after a print book, and it will be an audiobook at some point, I think this summer, but I'm not sure of the schedule. But yeah, just, Steve, you do all this, you work with bookstores and marketing, and we're always just looking for ways to get the word out.
What I found interesting, just to tag on to what you're saying, is that I come from, in part, a marketing background, and a lot of it's with strangers.
Yeah.
You start with a list that you've got somewhere, and you find lookalikes on Facebook, whatever you do, buy ads. You told me you didn't want to do any of that, and that what you wanted to do was start from your essentially friends and family network and go out from there.
Yeah.
Which I think is a really interesting and probably more connected principle. So can you explain a little more? I've actually been meaning to ask you more about what that's, so I'm going to take this case.
Yes, maybe just my personality. I mean, I'm really an introvert, honestly. I'm happiest when I'm alone in the studio, painting or writing, and I love everybody. I love you guys. Don't take this the wrong way. But introvert, extrovert, where do you get your energy? So I can be just tired out and everything, and I go in and I, paint or write, and I'm just like, wow, I've got all this energy. But, all of the promotional stuff I find very draining. So it's easier if to invite a friend to something or to invite a friend of a friend kind of thing. And I enjoy that, and then I enjoy being with people. And I enjoy meeting strangers too. It's not bad. It's just that, I've helped a lot of people with marketing. I've designed a lot of logos. I've designed a lot of advertising brochures. I'm great with helping other people, toot their, my mother used to say, toot your own horn. Did your mother ever say that? Yeah, she did, yeah. And I always found tooting my horn really hard.
Christine, I haven't asked you this before, but are you promoting it in Kansas City, Missouri? Have you gone back there?
I'm going to. My friend Linda, dear friend, Cynthia me, she is involved with the Nelson Atkins Art Museum, and she is hosting a lovely event for me in early September, just getting it all figured out, and we'll have a bookstore involved with the books, and we'll maybe do some tie-in with the dance art in the museum that has some dance figures or dance images in it, and maybe also some Kansas City history. So, but again, who and someone to help make it a special event, because I do have people that I know in Kansas City, not family really anymore, but a lot of old friends, high school and college friends, friends of the family. So I'm looking forward to that.
Chris, you may be an introvert, but you are the most persistent, optimistic, creative person I've ever known.
That is so accurate, Carol. I am a persistent optimist. I'll take that, and I think that my character, Mattie, is too. And I think that's one of the things I was wanting to make the book about. This kind of resilience, this kind of cup half full. And I'll share with you that, since Quinn died, I'm not as much of an optimist as I used to be. But I had so much optimism to start out that I guess I could, as much as I've lost, which is quite a bit, I'm still cup half full. But But that's, yeah, the tenacity, that's the Swedish side. And I do mention Swedish immigrants in here, and that was part of that too. It's like, yeah, thank you, Mom. This book's about my dad's family, but thank you, Mom. Harris.
Well, one wonders the pathway to a review in the Times.
Oh, one wonders. If anyone knows, anybody who writes book reviews, which are getting harder to get, I suppose, because I think fewer people are writing them, and there's not quite the same number of magazines and newspapers that carry them. But yeah, that would be great. Yeah, one wonders. Yeah.
How is it done?
Same way she's marketing, people that know people that know people that know.
Yeah,
people.
that's a whole other thing, though. Yeah, it's not social media. It's like you got to get someone who's writing reviews for something, and they will get it published. Yeah. I'm sorry, did you?
So I had a question about the transcript of your grandmother's diary.
Yeah.
She wrote a diary, and then somebody, why did they have to transcribe it?
My grandmother wrote on whatever she could find. You know, it was the Great Depression. She didn't have those nice bound journals that you buy these days. Yeah, and so my aunt just had all of my head grandmother had come out to live in California toward the end of her life, and my aunt ended up having all of her boxes of, things that she wrote on the back of envelopes or whatever, and she would date things, and then so my aunt typed everything up, so to give to the grandkids. Yeah. I also I was just going to show you, my grandfather is an architect and a poet, and my grandmother, he was twice poet laureate of Kansas, and my grandmother put this little book together. So there are a couple of his poems that my character, Elliot, the dad in the book, speak, and I give my grandfather credit in the copyright page. And then there's a poem that doesn't really work as a poem, but I have the father use it as sort of a little fable. So I pulled in some things from my grandfather with that. Yeah.
So one way I think all of your wonderful readers can help you is to write a review and put it on Goodreads, copy it and put it on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it takes something like 50 positive 55-star reviews on Amazon that changes the algorithm and raises the profile of the book.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's true, but I have to say, I don't want to be in Copperfield talking about Amazon. Don't want to, definitely, you can go put your review on there, but buy your books here.
Yes. I didn't say to buy.
I know you did. You're on it too. But no, it's true. I mean, reviews help. All of those things help. And I mean, I'm guilty of it too. I mean, guilty is not the right word, but I'll read a book and I'll think, oh, that's really nice. And, it would be helpful, even if I don't know the author, to go and, say something nice about it, whether it's a letter to them or email, or which might never reach them, or to their publisher, or put it on online someplace. Goodreads is a good place too. So I'm not opposed to getting Amazon reviews, but I'm not going to sit up here and promote them for many reasons. Yeah. Okay.
Another good trick is to go whenever you're in a bookstore, just ask for Christine's book and see if they have it. And they probably won't, so they'll start hearing about it more.
Thank you, yeah.
So much is done with staff and bookstores and influence.
Yeah. Let's see if there's anything. I think I've covered my main topics. Yep. Questions from anyone? All right, I don't want to keep you too long. They can buy books at the up there. If you want to buy a book, and here's what I would say: if you have my book or you don't want to buy my book, it would be really nice for Copperfields that you either got something tonight or came back and help them, because these events are free and it takes their staff time, and I really appreciate you having me here tonight. So. And all of you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. So, thank you very much.